Alrighty, welcome, and thank you for attending the Colorado Natural Medicine Advisory Board's stakeholder meeting via webinar today. The date is Friday, March 8th, 2024, and the time is 2:02 p.m. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Darcy Magnuson, and I'm I'm the Deputy Division Director of Boards and Commissions. Also attending is Lori Bratton, Program Director, Sam Barami, Senior Advisor on Natural Medicine Services, and Maria Hernandez, Regulatory Coordinator. For those of you that are not aware, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. Some of you may or may not have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before. However, if this is your first meeting, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life or your business, so your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting the new rules. More specifically, today, we will be discussing the proposed new rules to implement Colorado Senate Bill 23290. So shifting to the slides, we're going to talk a little bit before we start taking stakeholder feedback about why we are here today. Just an overview of the rulemaking procedure, the process, and the stakeholder engagement. And then once we go through all of that, we will ask for specific feedback regarding the draft rules and where you can locate those draft rules, as well as all of the other rulemaking activity on the program's website. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps. So why we are here today, I briefly mentioned that in my earlier comments, but the reason why we're here today is to hear from stakeholders. So you should have received with the notice for today's stakeholder meeting the draft rules that are currently being proposed, and those are being proposed to implement Senate Bill 23290. And so with those draft rules, they are posted on the program's website. And then we're asking today to hear from you. So if you have feedback or suggestions on what should be changed in those rules, what should be added to those rules, that's what we want to gather from you today. And then we'll be able to answer questions about procedure and discuss the next steps throughout this meeting as well. So the rulemaking procedure, these are new rules, which I mentioned earlier. So all of the rulemaking processes for state agencies are detailed in the Colorado Administrative Procedure Act, which is in Title 24 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. So there are several stages involved in the rulemaking process. We are at the beginning stage, right? So we're implementing this legislation. Right now, we're at the stakeholder engagement stage. It says that it's after the notice of proposed rulemaking. That's correct. The stakeholder engagement process is throughout. So what we're trying to get today is stakeholder feedback from you about the proposed rules before we file the notice of permanent rulemaking with the Secretary of State's office, which is required by the Colorado Administrative Procedure Act. And then we will continue to solicit stakeholder feedback from you. After that, then there is a hearing, a formal public hearing where stakeholders are invited to testify before the rules are adopted. And then finally, the last step in the process is the rules are adopted, an Attorney General's opinion is requested, and then they're published in the Colorado Register before they become effective. So we, like I said, are at the beginning of this process where we're asking for feedback from you. Today, how to participate. You heard at the beginning, hopefully, that this meeting is being recorded. And what we're asking for is you can participate in a couple of different ways. You can raise your hand using the hand icon on the Zoom webinar, and we will unmute your line. We ask that and I'll go through this a little bit more, but identify yourself. And then we'll just work through people. We have hands raised right now currently. So that's one option, is to use the hand raising function. The other way that you can participate is through the Q&A. And since this meeting is being recorded, I will read your name and your comments into the recording. And then once I've done that, I will answer it live, and you will be able to read those as well through the webinar. And then you can also submit written comments regarding the proposed new rules. You're seeing the email address on the screen right there. And those comments, as we receive them, we acknowledge that we have received them, and then we post them on the program's website. I'll show you on the next slide how you can navigate to that. But we do post them quickly as we receive them. And so the purpose or the reasoning behind that is that this is supposed to be a collaborative process, and we want you to be able to see and read and hear what others are saying about the proposed new rules. And so that link that's on our website is live, and it's constantly being updated as new comments are received. And then, like I said, the public notices tab, I'll show you how to navigate to that on the next slide before we start taking stakeholder comments. And then finally, this meeting is being recorded, like you heard and like I mentioned, and we will post it on the program's website, what you're seeing right now on the screen under the public notices tab, by the close of business on Monday, so that you can share it with others, or you can listen to it again if you would like to. And we will continue to update all of those links if any changes are made to the rules as well. So as this stakeholder meeting is held solely by webinar, we do ask, like I said, that you raise your hand. You can raise your hand using the hand icon, and we'll unmute your line, or you can type into the Q&A. When you do provide comments, we ask that you state your name and the name of the organization that you represent, if any. You can provide general comments on the proposed new rules, or if you have specific comments or language that you would like to see added or changed within the rules, you can do that too. And that's helpful because after today's meeting, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the draft rules and add comments into the rules so that you can see what other people have had to say. So if you can direct us to the specific place where you're wanting to make revisions or make additions, proposed additions, then that's helpful. And because of the number of attendees on this meeting today, we are asking that you limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes. If you agree with someone else, you're welcome to let us know that as well, and we will note that. And finally, if you're using the audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum. So at this point, we will go ahead and start taking stakeholder feedback, and I will just go down the list in the order of which the hands are raised. So the first person that I'm showing is Rob Colbert, or Rob Colbert. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but you are unmuted on our end. Once you unmute, we should be able to hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I appreciate the time, and I appreciate all of the work that has gone into the draft proposal. My work as an LPC, also working within psychedelic assisted therapy, providing ketamine assisted therapy, and research with MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD. I feel it's important that this is not seen as like recreating the wheel, and that some of the higher bars to meet can be revisited and reduced, especially for some of the requirements for legacy holders and people who are looking to hold facilitator or clinical licenses on that field. The education and training for facilitator and clinical training seems to be somewhat not considering of it being an occupation that it really just doesn't need a high level expertise necessarily, but instead should be seen as something similar to other occupations like licensures for cosmology or barbers. Make it more accessible for single parents, for people who have other careers and want to just be a contributor in this space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand. Next is Dory Lewis. Dory Lewis, you are unmuted on our end.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry if there's too much background noise. I'll do my best to be brief. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for all the time and effort, and also just considering the stakeholder opinions. It really matters a lot, and I appreciate all the ways that you've made it accessible for us to submitted written comments and speak to this meeting. So thank you so much for that. I want to speak to section 4.1E regarding training program standards. And it states that a governing body that has legal authority needs to be involved in conducting the education in the training program. My concern with this is that smaller for-profit and non-profit training programs that are maybe more grassroots or that are run by maybe a handful of people will kind of be pushed out of this the opportunity to provide quality and different opportunities for training aside from much larger institutions which already have governing bodies in place. And similarly, in 4.1E, it talks about student access to support services. And while I do think it's really important that students do have access to disability services and healthcare and academic achievement strategies, which is all stated in the law, again, smaller training programs will struggle to meet those requirements because they don't exist within larger institutions that have things like financial aid or federal accreditation. So programs that are larger, that are already connected to institutions, will be able to meet those needs really quickly. But what that will, my concern is that it will ultimately end up edging out smaller grassroots community-run training programs that are run by people who live and work in Colorado who are not attached to larger institutions. So the hope is that maybe some of that language can be parsed out so that it can include some of these smaller grassroots community-run Colorado training programs and allow us to participate. So thank you so much, Dory Lewis, LPC. I am a therapist. I was a therapist on the MAP study for MDMA for trauma, ketamine-assisted psychotherapist and educator for the Psychedelic Research and Training Institute and Elemental Psychedelics, and founder and owner of Elemental Psychedelics. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next is Gabe DeRita. Gabe DeRita, you are unmuted on our end.
Thank you, Darcy. Appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this exciting chapter in Colorado history and really appreciate all the work that went into providing access to these rules and to the chance for the community to make its voice heard here. We're all very grateful for the opportunity to share some perspectives with you guys. My name is Gabe DeRita. I am a ICF accredited professional certified life coach, and I practice integration coaching, working with psychedelics in my coaching practice. And I work for a human company called Effective Connection LLC, and I primarily practice and work here in Colorado. And my concerns with the language as drafted specifically relates to the portion around legacy healers. Doors should be clear in defining who is considered a legacy healer, with clear definition of intentions for whom this title applies to. And the recommendation is that DORA consider applicants who can provide at least 5 to 7 written references, including those from community members, past clients, and professional peers. It would also be helpful to adequately articulate the practice and philosophy and ethical commitments, safety protocols, and how they demonstrate cultural competency and our reciprocity with Indigenous communities when defined the legacy hero role. To have this be open to people from non-medical and non-traditional backgrounds while still remaining robust in terms of how we're vetting people who want to contribute to this work. And I think particularly people who want to contribute in a non-medical and non-clinical setting. then I would encourage Dora to consider explicit language or even a facilitator license tier that applies to non-medical approaches to working with psychedelics, which are very successful and effective and meet a different group of Coloradans' needs. Not everybody is going to be coming to this for therapy. Some people are going to be coming to this for personal growth and healing. It's important that the license, the people who can deliver those services are able to give that care even outside of traditional medical academic institutional structures. So thank you for giving me the chance to provide input.
Thank you, Mr. Dorita. And I would also ask, I think it was not just me, but I had a difficult time understanding you because of some background noise. I don't know if you have submitted written comments, but it would likely be helpful to, because I know you were talking about specific rules, just to make sure we are able to capture that, if you don't mind submitting that in writing too.
Okay.
Thank you. Next is Natasha Poinsett. You are unmuted.
Hello, my name is Natasha Poinsett, and I'm the Colorado Director for the Healing Advocacy Fund, a nonprofit whose mission is to protect and expand safe, legal, state-regulated access to psychedelic healing for all who need it. First of all, I want to thank your team at DORA as well as the Natural Medicine Advisory Board for the careful analysis that went into these draft rules. A number of elements are very encouraging for the foundation of a safe, accessible, and viable regulated access program in Colorado. In particular, I support the inclusion of two license types, facilitator and clinical facilitator, and the option for dual licensure, so licensed clinicians can bring their training and experience into their practice as licensed natural medicine facilitators. This will support participant safety and more integrated care. A few other positive highlights are the two accelerated training pathways, a comprehensive set of minimum training requirements, and the addition of a consultation period to support experiential learning. At the Healing Advocacy Fund, we do recommend consideration of several changes to the draft rules. In particular, we recommend requirement of a safety screen rather than attempting to codify conditions and rule that require participants to either receive medical clearance or work with a clinical facilitator. The range of conditions and medications that might benefit from consultation and risk review by a licensed clinician is too extensive to reasonably capture in rule. And rules, which are inherently difficult to change, are not the right tool to determine what next steps are appropriate to each person's unique and holistic health profile. Where a safety screen indicates a participant may benefit from consultation with a medical provider, we recommend allowing review and consultation with an appropriately credentialed clinician as an option, in addition to medical clearance or referral. In addition to these changes, we recommend inclusion of other license types as clinical facilitators, namely registered nurses, naturopathic doctors, and licensed pharmacists. Because the clinical facilitator license does not allow someone to practice outside the scope of their secondary licensure, it shouldn't be necessary to limit clinical facilitator licensure to those who are specifically licensed to practice medicine or psychotherapy. Rather, it makes sense to include any licensed provider whose scope of practice would confer technical and clinical knowledge to safely advise and support higher risk clients. And then finally, we recommend reassessment of the rules for approval of training programs, ensuring that requirements will support quality, structural integrity, and financial sustainability of the training program without unduly and unnecessarily burdening smaller scale programs with bureaucratic hurdles. We submitted a few other recommendations in our written comments, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you again so much.
Thank you. Next is Shannon Hughes. Shannon Hughes, you are unmuted.
Great. Hi, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Shannon Hughes. I'm an associate professor in social work at CSU, but I have many years experience in both nonprofit and for-profit education and training programs around natural medicine in Colorado. And I acknowledge just all the work by the many, many hands that went into the creation of these draft rules, and there's much more still ahead for all of us. But I appreciate Dora's apparent focus on acknowledging these, like, or creating these multiple license pathways into facilitation services, and acknowledging that there exists in Colorado a lot of people who already have background, training, experience in this work, and so trying to create these like reasonable access points for these people specifically, I think will make this program much more successful. So I also submitted written commentary with more detail on my comments here. But in general, yeah, I agree with these. The training program standards as written seem to favor like large, well-financed institutions like universities and higher education. So it really seems important that potential students in Colorado have multiple pathways into training programs that fit their learning styles and practice backgrounds and professional goals and practice philosophies. So these might be large online programs, small in-person programs, for-profit, nonprofit, higher ed. And so I'm hoping that we can change some of the language around those standards in that section to see really support a variety of programs outside of conventional academic degree seeking settings. And also just want to echo my second comment that around required medical and behavioral health clearance for anyone taking a psychotropic medication. I just don't believe there's enough evidence of increased risk with use of psychotropic meds, which is a really broad category with psilocybin mushrooms specifically, to like warrant a required medical clearance. The evidence suggests more that concomitant use of these meds tends to just blunt the effects of mushrooms, which is something that can be handled in an informed consent process rather than in rulemaking. So just echo that the actual slice of population at increased risk is quite small probably. And so keeping barriers and costs to a reasonable level and trying to manage this through screening and consent rather than by rule. Thank you very much for listening and appreciate all the efforts here.
Thank you. And I realize 2 minutes goes by really quickly, and I appreciate you trying to stay within your time. So next is Joe Harrison. Joe Harrison, you are unmuted.
Yes, hi. Thank you for holding this time to give feedback on the draft rules. My name is Joe Harrison, and I'm the Executive Director of Naropa University's Center for Psychedelic Studies. As an organization that's in its third year being engaged in facilitator training, we are interested in submitting a request for pre-approval. And my question and comment is around the pre-approval process. And just to understand, because we are currently engaged in training, we intend to apply, or we want to apply by April 1st, which is well in advance of the March 31st, 2025 approval deadline. So we'll be applying this year. And it would be good for us to have clarity, and probably other training sites, as to how we submit these applications and what the response time to those applications will be. And this is specifically in section 4.1.6. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate your questions. Sure. I think those will be best directed at Lori Bratton, who is the program director. And we can figure out a way to get her email. It's we can, if you want to put that question into the Q&A, then we can send her email to everyone on the call.
Perfect. Will do.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Next is Joshua Capel. Joshua Capel, you are unmuted.
Hi, my name is Joshua Capel. I'm a founding partner at the law firm Vicente and also a senior advisor with the Healing Advocacy Fund. First, I just want to, thank you for the very thoughtful regulations, that were produced. Creating this dual licensing structure is really groundbreaking when it comes to safe access to psychedelic care. And, and I think it's going to be really beneficial, to bring safety and access to some of the most vulnerable populations. So thank you for that. And, a couple just, quick suggestions. One, we're both, both at Vicente and at the Healing Advocacy Fund strongly supportive of using a safety screen instead of, outlining active conditions or medications that require medical clearance. A safety screen will be more exact. It'll be easier to be updated, and it'll also, provide, just a lot more, comprehensive screening. And so, that's step one. Step two is for those, individuals who aren't high risk on a safety screen, allow them to provide informed consent instead of being forced to use a clinical facilitator or receive medical clearance. In many cases, an individual might want to use a facilitator for psychospiritual healing or for or because of the facilitator's background, and they shouldn't be forced into a clinical facilitator model if they are providing informed consent about the risk factors or contraindications they have. And then finally, in general, very supportive of increasing the number of training hours. This profession works with, very vulnerable populations and altered states, and so more training seems to be appropriate, as facilitators are really the gatekeeper of safety here. And with that, also easing the restrictions around legacy healers and making sure that all legacy healers have an easy pathway into the system, because really, that population is the one that has the most experience with these medicines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person is Joshua. Oh, sorry, that was the last person. The next person is Sean McAllister. Sean McAllister, you are unmuted.
Okay, good afternoon. In the ether of this meeting with no faces, Sean McAllister from McAllister Law Office, lawyer working with many therapists, doctors, naturopaths, traditional healers, and others to try to understand the system and help get them licensed. And I've previously made written comments. I guess I won't take a lot of time with those specific comments I've already made, but the general thrust is a concern that we're going to have rules that when the application process starts in December into next year, that no one's going to be able to qualify as a licensee or a facilitator. And we could see a 6 or 12-month delay in actual implementation of the law, because it feels like very few people are going to be able to meet the clinical facilitator requirements of 50 hours of consultation when nobody is currently licensed as a licensee or a distinguished educator to get that consultation from. And so that's a big picture concern. And I think accelerated licensure, we need more clarity on what it would take from prior experience, prior training to meet those requirements, since, again, no one right now is a distinguished educator or licensee. How would you get the consultation required? That's one comment. I also am concerned that clinical facilitators seem to be stuck only doing clinical work, and that they can't essentially act under the regular facilitator license as a spiritual practitioner. And many doctors, therapists, et cetera, licensed professionals I talk to do want to work in the spiritual way, and I think they should be able to. I know I'm running out of time, so I just look forward to rules on in-home use and group use outside of healing centers. I know that's still to come, but that's a critical component for keeping costs down, and also looking for a clearer path for Indigenous healers. Particularly, I don't think a Shipibo shaman should have to take a 25-hour ethics course if they can make an ethics pledge or have an evaluation that they've been doing this work for many years, that an additional course shouldn't be required. So thank you for letting me go a little over, but a little clearer path for Indigenous healers would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am going to read into the recording some of the written comments that we've received through the Q&A that you should have been able to review on your own. Paul Dankers said, in the draft proposal, I saw that there are facilitator licenses as well as educator licenses, and it looks like if you have an educator license that you cannot also be a facilitator. Perhaps you could clarify for me if it would be possible to hold both a facilitator and an educator license. I'm not going to read the ones about the email address. Or the recording that will be available on our website. Same with the draft rules that are there. And then some other ones that we have received. Dana Toscania Starbird said she agreed with Rob. JT Smedendorf, does this rule draft have any relationship to the religious right to pray with natural medicines? Is it attempting to address this dimension at all? Is there any group or draft attempting to regulate religious use? Kathy Colhane Shelburne, strongly agree with Ms. Poinsot's comments. An anonymous attendee said that the view does not show names or an organization. You should be able to see who's speaking when they are unmuted. Ashley Buckberg, I agree that psychotropic meds is too broad. We had a question about the deadline for written comments. The board and the director will continue to accept written comments up until the date of the permanent rulemaking hearing, which is scheduled right now for May 3rd of this year. Paul Dankers, I support or agree with the speakers who have mentioned the undue financial and procedural hurdle that the medical waiver requirement puts in front of people who may not have A, access to a doctor, or B, have a doctor who doesn't personally believe in psychedelic use or is worried about the repercussions for their medical license and refuses to give clearance for psychedelics. Joe Harrison, Executive Director of the Naropa Center for Psychedelic Studies. I was hoping to get clarification around the pre-approval process for facilitator training sites, the mechanism for submitting those requests, and the turnaround time. Any information would be greatly appreciated. I'm going to get through a couple more of these and then I will go back to raised hands. Liz Kasarin, how many Indigenous people who have been medicine generational carriers have been consulted when compared to the general population? I don't know if that's the general population involved in creating these rules thus far. Angela Melsner, comments, thank you so much for drafting this. I can see there was great effort put in for this regulation. One comment I have is to define what type of training is allowed or counts as training hours across the board of all psychedelic training, such as ketamine training and ketamine training. In ketamine training, I've had 50 hours on ACOS, ethics, cultural sensitivity, safe touch, and how to hold safe and setting. I worry about larger institutions charging high prices for training with long wait times to get into training being approved trainers when many of us already have ACOS training on top of our master's degree training as a psychotherapist. Second comment is to please be careful about making sure your regulations cover small rural areas that don't have nonprofits or larger institutions to rely on for income to help get approval or financial help for clients. Alrighty, I'm going to shift back to raised hands. John Treem. John Treem, you are unmuted.
So much for the opportunity. It's a real pleasure. My name is Jonathan Treem. I'm a palliative care physician and founder of the Psychedelic Public Policy Partnership, which is a group of healthcare practitioners in Colorado dedicated to helping enact safe, just, and health-conscious policy in the implementation of psychedelics. We submitted written feedback, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but I really wanted to call attention to section 2.2A6 concerning what participants require oversight by a clinical facilitator. The draft rules as written don't seem to include any sort of criteria that are either clinically relevant or even defined. Like, for example, it says that anybody with a cardiovascular disease, liver disease, severe suicidal ideation, terminal illness, or severe chronic illness needs to be directed to a clinical facilitator. The problem is that none of those things actually have clinical definitions. Cardiovascular disease can encompass anything from something that has almost no appreciable risk in the pursuit of psychedelic therapies to something that would be actually highly morbid, potentially in sort of a psychedelic facilitation. Severe suicidal behavior has no formal definition. Terminal illness has no formal definition. Severe chronic illness, certainly no formal definition. And therefore, it's likely that those criteria are going to create more confusion, not more facility or more safety in the pursuit of psychedelic therapies publicly. So I think that Ms. Poinsett and Mr. Capel both made the point that we agree with, which is that rather than have diagnostic criteria for who might need a clinical facilitator oversight, we strongly recommend a screening form that would essentially allow for sort of a risk assessment for all participants in psychedelic therapy to help direct them to the providers who might be able to serve that relative risk. I also want to make the comment that I would really like to see DORA convene an independent advisory board to make an industry standard medical clearance form. As general practitioners in Colorado are unlikely to have enough familiarity with the relative risk of psychedelic therapies to advise participants with expertise if they just show up in their office. And that this should be something that actually is part of the regulatory body, not necessarily, defined by, but something that we can sort of share and adapt over time as the medical profession becomes more familiar with psychedelics. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Thomas Downs. Thomas Downs, you are unmuted.
Hello. Good afternoon, y'all. I am Tom Downs, and I have lived in Boulder for 9 years with my wife and dogs. I am a light-skinned Black man with Taino, Caucasian, and Afro-Caribbean ancestors. In 2020, I survived a traumatic brain injury, which left me with constant stress headaches, ocular migraines, depression, and other cognitive impairments. Please accommodate me if I run a little over time. I'm a small business social entrepreneur and the owner of Calm Downs. In 2021, one of my businesses, Flatirons Political Art, became insolvent, and I took professional leave to focus on my recovery, putting many of my social enterprise developments on hold. In 2022, my heart was stopped for 77 minutes while undergoing open heart surgery at BCH Foothills to replace the dissected aorta. A turning point in my recovery, when I felt my will to live was restored, was a psilocybin journey. Thank you all for the important work you're doing to ensure that this relational medicine is accessible to those who would benefit from her healing. In 2023, I traveled to Mexico to mark the 1-year anniversary of my aortic dissection by undergoing a residential group psilocybin retreat. Together with 15 others, facilitators helped each of us through a transformational process that the majority of our group now describes as life transforming. Thank you for your work creating draft rules, your study of the issues around implementation, and your service to make sure that the incredible healing potential of psilocybin is available to Coloradans who could benefit from it. These draft rules, while robust, must better address access, equity, and practicality, ensuring that licensed practitioners can facilitate group therapy sessions in a residential retreat setting that could last days or weeks. Failing to allow residential group healing retreats in the regulated psilocybin access program would deprive licensed facilitators and therapists the ability to employ this extremely effective protocol for the benefit of their patients and their families. Addiction, a condition that psilocybin has shown effectiveness in treating, often is reinforced by maladaptive family dynamics. Residential group retreats often are helpful to families looking to overcome deep trauma, grief, addiction, and other issues that tear Colorado families apart. Equally, the unresolved stance on research and multidisciplinary activities requires clarity. I have spoken to many therapists and have read that using medicinal cannabis, ketamine, DMT, and other psychedelic and natural medicine treatments increase the effectiveness of psilocybin to induce the neuroplasticity needed in coordination with integration sessions to reprogram maladaptive coping processes. Restricting psilocybin facilities to not allow therapists to engage in complementary healing protocols will hamper research of these powerful medicines. Equity, access, and multidisciplinary psychedelic research are all important to our mission at Calm Downs. We hope that this board will consider focusing on these items as we move forward in this process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next is Marcy Addy. Marcy Addy, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you so much, Darcy. My name is Marcy Addy, and I'm the Program Director for Acadia Professional Learning. We currently run a psilocybin facilitator training program that's licensed in Oregon under OPS and HEC licensure. We started our program because my co-owner Travis became a facilitator this past year, and found that the cost of the programs here were prohibitive for most people. You're looking at more than $10,000 for most programs for just the curriculum. A lot of them charge additional for practicum. So we started one that's about $5,500. It is $5,500 for both curriculum and practicum. It's one of the cheaper ones in the state because we wanted this to be accessible. And so my biggest concern comes with the number of hours being required by Colorado and how that makes it even more inaccessible to people. I am an educator. I have a master's degree in education. I have been working for 18 years in education. I have designed entire units and curriculum for more than a decade. And I'm concerned that the people who put the curriculum together and attached hours requirements did not consult people who had curriculum development experience. When I see something like 25 hours attached to something with, 9 pieces of content, it seems to me like they were trying to kind of give it priority status, like, hey, this is a really important topic, without actually looking at the content. So I hope that you will be really, really intentional about every single hour that you require, because that's a direct cost to students, and that's ultimately going to be passed on to clients. I agree with Sean about the consultation hours, the 50-hour requirement. Before people are even really facilitators, it's going to take them a long time. Probably that's 1 hour a week for an entire year, right? Where they have to consult before they can actually get that license. So just please be really considerate about the number of hours you're requiring, making sure that there is a real reason for that hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Michael Briggs. Michael Briggs, you are unmuted.
Hi, my name is Michael Briggs. I'm the president of Spiritus Oregon, a state-regulated psilocybin manufacturer. I'm also a Coloradan who voted for Proposition 122. I'm concerned with subsection 2.2A9 of these rules with regard to the term psychotropic medication. Psychotropic medication presumably refers to SSRIs, SNRIs, and the like. Clinical studies have proven over and over that mixing these medications with psilocybin does not result in adverse medical events. Lithium is the only prescription psychiatric medication that has been studied that does, and its active use should be a disqualifying factor for participants. I must impress the impact of this rule upon you. In 2018, 13.2% of all US adults were regularly taking antidepressants. Prescriptions for these medications have risen every year since. Participants in this program will be taking these medications at much higher rates than the national average. There's no medically relevant reason to impose the financial and procedural burden of another medical appointment. If clients do not obtain medical clearance, these rules require they see a more costly clinical facilitator. This rule will not result in fewer adverse medical events. It will only result in lower participation in life-saving care. Not only does this rule contradict significant clinical research, it also is not legally defensible. This rule runs directly counter to the Natural Medicine Statute 12-170-104, 6 subsection 8, and its subsections. It clearly states that access must be made affordable, equitable, and inclusive. We should be working to drive costs down, not up. I propose striking this rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Justin Townsend. Justin Townsend, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Let me just first of all echo the sentiments of the other participants for the hard work that's gone into this. My name is Justin Townsend. I am the CEO and head facilitator at Micro Meditations Jamaica. Just to give you some context, we are a Western contemporary therapeutic model. We've been operating for about 10 years here. We are a mental health model. We're not a wellness model. To date, we've served over 2,000 clients, more than 6,000 doses of psilocybin. We are very interested in being able to operate a retreat center in Colorado. It's my understanding that some US states are putting a cap on the amount of grams that can be given to a client, such as 5 grams in Colorado. I couldn't find anything in the recommendations around a cap, so that's my first question. Will there be a cap? We have a stable of about 35 to 40 very, very experienced and well-educated licensed clinicians that work for us here in Jamaica, none of which, unfortunately, are licensed in the state of Colorado. Will there be some kind of a bridge for us to be able to bring our therapists that are very experienced to operate our mental health model in Colorado? We do a lot of, well, our retreats are group work. We cap off at 12 people per retreat. I didn't see anything in the recommendations about maximum group sizes. Neither did I see anything about the minimum amount of facilitators required to work with a given group size. So what's the ratio of facilitators to group size? On a more business level, are there any provisions being made for banking psilocybin revenue? National banks won't touch it until the FDA have approved and rescheduled psilocybin. Are there credit unions and the like that have been organized in Colorado that will accept psilocybin or psilocybin adjacent revenue? Likewise, public liability insurance. And I will finish by saying that whilst I wholeheartedly agree with the premise of affordability, accessibility, and inclusivity, I do find that the experiential aspect of the training for all levels of facilitation to be woefully inadequate. My belief is individuals need many hundreds of hours of exposure. There isn't much that we haven't seen and witnessed here in Jamaica across 2,000 clients, and anticipating how different people will respond to psilocybin is I think underestimated here. My concern is that many people without a clinical diagnosis are walking trauma units without realizing it. They will end up working with non-clinician facilitators, and those facilitators will be out of their depth of what they're having to deal with. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Ryan Phillips and then go back to the Q&A after this. Ryan Phillips.
Hello, my name is Ryan Phillips. I'm with Transcendent Integrative Health. I'm a naturopathic doctor who has been focused on integrative mental health for the last 3 years, and I'm currently wrapping up my training with IPI in Boulder and psychedelic-assisted therapy. I've submitted written comments as well, but would like to briefly cover those. The first would be 2.2A9 regarding who is able to provide medical and behavioral health clearance. Naturopathic doctors have not been included in this list. Naturopathic doctors are trained as primary care physicians and are also trained in natural medicine and in mental health. Given this, I think that naturopathic doctors are the most robustly trained to be able to assess drug-plant interactions and also their effect in mental health. So I would like to suggest that naturopathic doctors are added to the list of professionals who are able to give medical and behavioral health clearance. Number two, similarly, we have these two breakdowns where we have a clinical facilitator license and a facilitator license. Naturopathic doctors have not been included in the list of professionals who are allowed to apply for the clinical facilitator license, but we also don't neatly fit into the facilitator license because we do have the right to diagnose and treat under our Colorado scope of practice. So we've been kind of left in a gray zone in between these two licenses. I believe that based on our scope of training and our scope of practice here in Colorado, we fit into the clinical facilitator license and not into the facilitator license, and I would like for my profession to be added to that list. So comment number 3 that I have here is also concerns about the requirements for application for licensure, especially for those individuals who have already completed a program at Naropa or IPI or other similar program that also have a clinical license. These requirements are going to delay access for Coloradans and impose arbitrary requirements on people who are already adequately trained. Thank you for your time and for your work in this issue.
Thank you. Moving back to the Q&A, Joey Lerner, must training or supervision be provided by licensees in Colorado, in the United States, would training and supervision obtained in Canada be acceptable? And just generally speaking, we certainly appreciate your questions and thank you for raising them. I mentioned earlier that this is being recorded so that we can post it on the website, which is correct. It's also being recorded so that it can be given to the board and to the director for consideration. So the board will discuss these draft rules at a meeting next Friday, March 15th, which will be open to the public. So just know that your questions are not, that they're being heard, and they will be heard by the board and the director as well. We've had a few comments about camera showing, and just so that everyone is aware, during stakeholder engagement meetings, STOR does not regularly utilize videos. Another comment about the deadline for written comments, which I think I already addressed, but we will continue to accept written comments up until the date of the rulemaking hearing, which is scheduled for May 3rd of this year. Mr. Phillips, we just heard from you. SJ Struckmeyer, as an integrative NP and certified nurse midwife who has been working with psilocybin for 3 decades, I echo what Sean McAllister's concerns regarding the 25 hours of ethics training. Some of us spiritual providers are eager to get started as patients are in dire straits. Thank you. Tina Williams, I strongly agree with Natasha Poinsette's comments. Martha Montemayor, I agree with Sean McAllister's comments. Anonymous attendee, I haven't seen that registered nurses are included in the clinical facilitator license. Is this a licensed profession that can be included in this type of license? Dr. Lloyd Covens, about your hand being raised, yes, we still have 12 hands raised, so we are getting through that list of folks. Erica Cowan, I want to voice agreement with Sean McAllister, Shannon Hughes, and Dory Lewis, and Tasia. I am also concerned about allowing for in-home and group use, allowed informed consent instead of expensive screening, and I support registered nurses as clinical facilitators by altering the verbiage of diagnose and treat. Alexa Cameron, I strongly agree with Tasia Poinsat and the Healing Advocacy Fund that nursing should be an included profession under the clinical facilitator license. Thank you. Liz Cesarin, the question was not answered, it was read. Can we be transparent about this process? Hopefully what I said earlier answered that. Kathy Colhane Shelburne, strongly agree with Dr. Treem's comments. Okay. And some of these are agrees. I'm going to go, just in the interest of time, I'm going to go back to the raised hands. Next is Bareen Majuska. Bareen Majuska, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Barina Majewska. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Vicente and also the co-lead of our psychedelic practice group. I have experience and contact with this field from a few different perspectives, including my time as a research assistant at Johns Hopkins on their psilocybin studies. And while I appreciate the healing potential of these medicines, which I think is massive, what I have seen has me concerned that as a community, we're not always taking seriously enough the risks that these medicines can present for individuals with certain medical and physical health conditions. In other words, I don't think we necessarily have in the conversation, I don't think we're acknowledging how unpredictable these medicines can be for certain sensitive individuals. And until that information is more broadly available and openly discussed as these medicines are decriminalized, I think it would serve us to be cautious. So based on that, I wanted to thank you and commend you all for coming up with what I think is a nuanced and intelligent way to address these types of concerns. I think the list of conditions that disqualify someone from seeing an ordinary facilitator, as well as the conditions that require medical clearance, are sensible and rational. A few folks have mentioned the use of a screening form rather than these sort of broad categorizations that don't have clear definitions. I do think a screening form would add a lot of specificity to that process. But I think that in general, the way you guys have structured this is quite sane and sensible. And I would echo other sentiments that naturopathic doctors should be added to the list of professionals able to give clearance to individuals with certain conditions based on the breadth of their training. And in general, thank you all for your efforts. I think this was a lot of work, and I think you guys, you created something that's quite sane and quite sensible.
Thank you, and my apologies on your name. I completely got that one wrong, so I apologize.
No problem. Thank you.
Next is Alexa Cameron. Alexa Cameron, you are unmuted.
Hi, my name's Alexa Cameron. I am a nurse navigator at the University of Colorado. I currently work with newly diagnosed brain tumor patients, and prior to that, I spent many years as a nurse in the burn ICU. I'm also on the University of Colorado NYU Phase 2B clinical trial using psilocybin to treat anxiety and depression in advanced cancer patients. I submitted a detailed written comment, so I will keep this short, but I wanted to draw attention to the exclusion of nurses in the nursing profession from the clinical facilitator license. I think we undergo extensive medical training, also learn how to communicate using therapeutic communication, and I think it's just a gross oversight to exclude nurses and all of our skills and gifts that we bring to the table. I think that we should be able to be a part of people's lives in a more meaningful way through the clinical facilitator license. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Mary Rondo. Mary Rondo, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Mary Rondeau. I'm a registered naturopathic doctor, a founding member of the Psychedelic Research and Training Institute, and I co-own Wholeness Center, an integrative mental health clinic in Fort Collins. I'm requesting that naturopathic doctors are included in the list of licensed health professionals to be eligible for clinical facilitator licensure, as well as to be able to provide clearances for patients seeking these treatments. Naturopathic doctors are able to diagnose and treat under our scope of practice in Colorado and have extensive training, particularly in the realm of botanical medicine. So thank you for hearing that.
Thank you. Next is Joseph Adams. Joseph Adams, you are unmuted.
Hi, yeah, my name is Joseph Holcomb Adams. I'm with the Shine Collective and also with the Ecstatic Integration newsletter. And I wanted to draw attention to in the preparation section, it says that, what's supposed to happen, point 4 is discussion of the concept of trusting inner guidance, which may include discussion of topics such as inner healing intelligence, inner genius, the self, wise mind, soul, or spirit. And so my question, I guess, was my comment was that these concepts could be considered to be perhaps religious in nature. There could be concerns about that maybe they don't necessarily belong in a state mandated transmission to the clients. So that was my comment or question-ish thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Philip Wolf. Philip Wolf, you are unmuted. Philip Wolf, looks like you're muted on your end. Okay.
All right. I'm sorry about that. It's quite difficult taking this in the setup that it is on a cell phone right now. So I apologize. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. We can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Philip Wolf. I've been a long time operator in the cannabis space and have a deep reverence for these medicines and lots of experience with these medicines. And I really appreciate everyone who's coming together and submitting their questions here today. And I've also, thank Dora for all of the work that's going into this. I know how complicated and dynamic setting something up like this is, and imagine that it's a lot bigger than anyone ever imagined. I use these, for me, the root of my mental health is spiritual health. And so I really back a lot of the people who are here speaking today around spiritual practitioners and creating certain sort of standards for them and having that included in the type of facilitators that are going to be getting licensed. I also really appreciate a lot of people speaking to the legacy servers and operators, if you will, and making sure that those people have a path to be able to go off of their historical credentials that they may have and not have to go through some of these certain regulatory measures that are being taken. But to take that one step further, I think there's a lot of respect for the indigenous ways, and I believe for the indigenous to be able to administrate these types of medicines in ways that no therapist is going to be able to do for quite some time until they have a lot of experience. And so mentioning that, I want to just hope that we can actually reach out to indigenous communities instead of indigenous communities having to come to Dora, because there's obviously a lot of language barriers that happen here and operational barriers that happen here. And so for us to maybe take the money and take the resources to go out and actually do the work to consult these indigenous communities so we can help bridge an understanding of how they would like for legacy servers of these medicines, if you will, to be able to get these types of licenses. What do they say? What are they suggesting would be the best for them, instead of all of us assuming that we know how to best include, putting in certain sort of, I say reducing restrictions, if you will, to allow them to operate, and also probably creating some sort of safety measures for them so they know that they're not going to be persecuted. We have to realize that these people have been oppressed historically. And so we need to create a foundation of trust whenever we do reach out to these communities. So I really wanted to speak to that, and I hope that is taken in consideration. Thank you for allowing me to go over time. My apologies. Again, it's kind of an awkward platform here on the telephone.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to another raised hand and then go back to the Q&A because we're continuing to receive those comments. Gary Perez. Gary Perez, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gary Perez. I'm the former caretaker of the peyote gardens down in Miranda City, Texas. I facilitated peyote ceremonies for numerous tribes in the U.S. and Canada. One of my concerns is that we have Tejano, Chicano, and Mexican Native American church chapters in Colorado that need the same amount of attention and respect for what's going on there in Colorado. My concern is they're going to be either underrepresented or misrepresented. Here in the state of Texas, we enjoy the use of peyote because of the Texas Administrative Code, which allows for non-federally recognized Indians to use this peyote, including Canada, the folks from Canada. It was the Texas Administrative Code was amended for them. And then in the 1990s, all the Chicano, Mexican American, and Tejano chapters started popping up in the state of Texas and then expanded into Colorado, Utah, California, and other places. So that's my concern. My second comment that I want to make is that there's already so little peyote left for us people here in Texas and the Native American church at large, and so hard to get and so expensive now. And that my concern is that if we go into the gardens, whether here or in Mexico, I forgot to mention I'm the cultural preservation officer for the indigenous governance of Coahuila, Mexico. If this process is going to go into the gardens and remove more peyote on top of the demand that's already there, I'm afraid we're going to lose it all. So I hope that the state of Colorado comes up with new ways to mitigate the impact or remove the entire impact on the gardens themselves. God bless you all and thank you.
Thank you. Okay, shifting to the Q&A, Deborah Avery. I'm a licensed psychiatric nurse practitioner in both Oregon and Colorado and founder of Alchemistic Journeys offering ketamine-assisted therapies. I am currently completing training with CIIS to complete education requirements for Oregon to operate a service center and to be a facilitator. Please be mindful of the licensure costs to individuals as Oregon's high licensure fees, upwards of $10,000 per year, is prohibitive to many small independent practices that do not have investors. Thank you. Marcy Addy, further comments, the language about whether training programs from other states counts toward license approval is too subjective, parentheses, quote, substantially equivalent, quote, end parentheses. I recommend stating explicitly whether something like an OPS approved training program qualifies or not. Regarding practicum, as written now, students could earn all 30 hours through experiencing, not observing or co-facilitating. I recommend requiring at least 20 to 25 hours be met through observing or co-facilitating. Further, as written, all practicum hours must be met in administration sessions. All major research indicates preparation and integration are more formative parts of the experience for clients. I recommend shifting the requirement to minimum 20 hours of admin, 10 in preparation or integration, or some variation thereof to ensure students are trained in these vital steps of the process. Michael Briggs, I agree with Paul Dankers, especially regarding medical professionals likely being very reticent to provide written documented approval for the use of federally illegal hallucinogens. Requiring documented medical clearance must be required in only the most medically risky of situations and not used as a catch-all. I also strongly agree with Dr. Treem, the Healing Advocacy Fund, and Vicente LLP with regard to managing client screening through an intake form. The form would be much more dynamic and manageable rather than dictating specifics within a legal regulation. Thank you for all of your hard work on these rules, and I'm excited to see them evolve in future iterations. Joey Lerner, will there be different training requirements for individuals already licensed mental health providers, psychiatrists, psychologists, LPCs, LCSWs in Colorado, but who lack specific psychedelic assisted therapy training now? Dr. Lloyd Covens, name and company of Oregon School Now Educating. I believe that may have been answered by another stakeholder. Joseph Caruso, I want to put in my support for live speakers in chronological order. Non-comment does not mean I do not support. Speaker 1, I agree with most points, but feel background checks and safety are paramount. Speaker 2, agree with points on smaller folks not being required to use governing body rules. Speaker 4, agree on all points and really agree on safety screening. Speaker 5, on all points. Speaker 7, agree on all points. Speaker 9 is extremely on point. Speaker 10, agree on residential treatment being helpful and needed to be considered. Speaker 12, agree on all points. Speaker 13, I agree we need to define limits and rules on how transfers and time, place, manner will be fully understood, including what records are required to be kept along with banking. Speaker 14, agree on NDs being included. I will add more as people speak. Daniel Castro, ayahuasca curandero from Ecuador and clinical counselor in Colorado. I am concerned that the regulations and guidelines do not include the care and respect to the spirit relatives, and we will likely experience a disorganization of the biorhythm of the spiritual realms, and clients as well as practitioners will experience physical, emotional, and spiritual challenges. Can you include a section led by Indigenous elders who can address this? Take one more written comment. Ryan Phillips, thank you for your support of the naturopathic community in Colorado. As the highest trained providers in natural medicine, we have a significant role to play, as do our nursing colleagues, doctors of Oriental medicine, and registered herbalists. And I was reading quickly in the interest of time. Back to raised hands. The next person I have with a raised hand is Tina Williams. Tina Williams, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. My name's Tina Williams. I'm a director at the Dysphoric Project, a psychedelic nonprofit focused on premenstrual conditions. Currently, there's a growing number of women turning to natural medicines for menstrual conditions, which is why our nonprofit was founded. I agree with the comments regarding establishing a screening process and would add that considering the menstrual cycle and related conditions should be included in that screening process if implemented. I've also provided written comments on behalf of the Dysphoric Project, which I will read here as well. In section 3.2, under the subtitle Drug Effects, Contraindications and Interactions, we propose an additional education requirement for facilitators working with females of reproductive age, awareness of the menstrual cycle, related conditions, and natural medicines. There's early stage research suggesting that menstrual cycle phase and certain menstrual conditions may interact with natural medicines. While this research is still in progress, there's a history of various indigenous customs related to this topic. At this time, the menstrual cycle is rarely discussed in psychedelic research, but that does not indicate its importance. There's a large body of literature on the serotonin system and the menstrual cycle, which provides a scientific basis for varying indigenous customs related to this topic. Identifying and analyzing variables in clinical research that may affect females differently from males, in this case, timing of dose, is required by law in the NIH Revitalization Act of 1993. We believe that this education addition will reduce harm for females of reproductive age who are seeking natural medicines. And we also believe that this addition will protect facilitators who are working with females of reproductive age.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Erica Messenger. Erica Messenger, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Erica Messenger. I'm a registered nurse specializing in rural health in Colorado. I have also had the honor and privilege of serving as a non-voting participant for the Emergency Response, Safety, and Ethics Subcommittee of the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. I am also a contributing member of the University of Colorado's Psychedelic Public Policy Partnership. Number one, I second the many comments recommending the inclusion of registered nurses as a qualifying clinical facilitator secondary license. It would also increase access to natural medicine services for the medically vulnerable participant by tapping into the 81,000 active registered nurses in Colorado versus limiting medical clinical facilitation to the 13,000 MD, DO, PA, and NPs. Number two, I also second Dr. John Treem, Tasha Poinsett, Joshua Capel, and others' comments regarding recommendation for an industry standard safety screening tool. Number three, I recommend the removal of the limiting qualifier for the clinical facilitation to those who can diagnose and treat. This requirement is not necessary for psychedelic therapy and would reduce access to care for medically vulnerable people, especially in rural areas, not to mention increase unnecessary costs to the participant. A clinical natural medicine facilitator should not diagnose any new condition for a participant unless they are also willing to assume care and create a treatment plan for that new condition that follows through and carries beyond the administration session. And number four, lastly, I recommend including an education and training component for sound, ethical, and legal business practice for facilitators, with curriculum advised by professionals in psychedelic business and tax law. Facilitators that do not know how to navigate a new and highly specialized landscape could make critical business mistakes and that could inadvertently put not only their profession at risk of failure, but could create personal liability as well. Thank you for allowing my comments today. I've also submitted written comments elaborating on these points.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Lewis. Sarah Lewis, you are unmuted.
Thank you. This is Sarah Lewis. I'm the Director of Training and Research at Naropa Center for Psychedelic Studies. Thanks so much to all the work that's been done. It's been great to hear from a number of colleagues in the field who are bringing in some great points. I wanted to raise a concern about the practicum and the way that it's worded in the draft rules. So our recommendation at Naropa is keeping the total 40 hours for practicum, but we'd like to suggest
actually removing this 5 to 6 administration session in a 30-hour period to give some more flexibility for practicum. So in reading some of the statements that were submitted, people were making some excellent points about wanting flexibility, sometimes allowing practicum to unfold over the training period, which might happen over a period of months. At Naropa, as an OHA accredited program, we've already been sending some of our students to practicum in Oregon, where we're accomplishing the 40-hour practicum in a 4-day period, bookmarked with preparation and integration. So with this 5 to 6 administration requirement built in, we really are afraid that this is going to be introducing major barriers, particularly for people who might live, 5, 6, 7 hours away from where their practicum will be happening, and this can create a barrier of people perhaps needing to make several trips to do their practicum, introducing barriers with childcare and work. And so we're really concerned about accessibility. Our assumption is that, by having this 5 to 6 administration session requirement, is speaking to the understanding that people really can be adequately trained to do this kind of facilitation in just a couple sessions. But we really like the consultation period and feel that in that 40-hour consultation period, that will be sufficient time, for people to be able to do several sessions under supervision. So we'd really just request that the practicum be kept to 40 hours, but that the 30-hour 5 to 6 administration session be modified. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Austin Pick. Austin Pick, you are unmuted.
Hi, I'm Austin Pick, also from Naropa University Center for Psychedelic Studies. I'm the Executive Director of Naropa Extended Campus and the Administrative Director of the Naropa Center for Psychedelic Studies. We've submitted some written comments, so I just wanted to chime in to what Dory said near the top, recognizing that the student access to support services as currently written establishes what could be an undue burden on training programs, even at a university where we do offer those services to degree-seeking students. We could not easily expand service to facilitator training participants without additional staff allocation and training. So want to echo those concerns and also point out that some of the named support services, such as career placement and financial aid, may have limited applicability in the context of facilitator training programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Lloyd Cubbins. Dr. Cubbins, you are unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for all the work of the Natural Medicines Group. I wanted to speak to your release of particular 120 didactic hours. And again, I think this is probably 80% very well thought through and presented. However, I do want to concur with some of the earlier comments from the other facilitator educators in that many of these topics tend to be very broad and not again, specifically tied to what you would consider a course, a curriculum, a skill, something you would give credit for. So my point here is you have a 24-hour suggestibility for ethics and Colorado natural medicine rules and regs. And we all want to talk about ethics, which could be combined with facilitator development, best practices, and of course, relational boundaries, physical touch, financial ethics, sexual ethics. And these are important. However, I would not put them in the context of and Colorado natural medicine rules. That could be a freestanding course that is free. That's produced once and then online for people to look at. Also, you have a broad brush for physical and mental health and state. And of course, there's so many components to mental health, from addiction to PTSD to depression. I certainly hope that we would look at those. And then nowhere on this outline do we have a microdosing session. I would suggest a harm reduction class, because harm reduction is the name of the game here. And as far as types of future licenses, I would really like us to look at a research license to be able to cooperate and assist schools like NYU, University of Colorado, CSU, Johns Hopkins, because we are going to have a lot of clients who come through facilities who might want to be part of research, and students at CSU or elsewhere in psychology, working under university control and supervision. I certainly would like to see a student license that would allow, say, a 19, 20-year-old to participate, and we don't put all our eggs into this 21 plus basket, really cutting off many people who might want to be in this field. And lastly, several folks have mentioned, well, let me again concur with Sean's comments and Bareen's certainly very smart on the comment about fully risk development and risk assessment, to where our industry is very dedicated to answering that percent of those who should not be in this program. Lastly, the retreats, the locations, the residences, these are in Colorado all going to be likely to be reviewed by local counties and local municipalities and controlled for safety, setting, and times. So one other place Dora might consider is a minor license going to a physical place, a retreat, a residence, that allows them to have a certain level of registration and understand how we want to have set and setting be 1,000% reliable. And I will continue on some of these other issues with the insurance agencies. Their contract to us basically says,
Sorry, Dr. Covens, I'm going to go. I need to cut you off just because of the interest of time. We still have some people that need to speak.
well,
so
I
you're
waited,
welcome.
so I'll finish this sentence.
Okay.
Insurance will give us liability help, physical help, and support the industry. But insurance carriers want to see a robust, thought through educational program that is monitored, accredited, and something that can be called upon for hours taught. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kelly Obenberger. Kelly Obenberger, you are unmuted.
Hi there, my name is Kelly Obenberger. I am a recreation therapist here in Colorado. With my profession being so niche that it is, we have probably thousands of recreation therapists across the US. And we would like to be included in the licensure. We get bachelor's and master's degrees in recreation therapy, the study that studies passions and hobbies and how to live a meaningful life for one person. So we would like to be included in the licensure as we work in mental health, and we have positive and negative, or positive experiences with negative outcomes being in the mental health field and how it uniquely qualifies people like us. So we would just like to be included in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jimmy Smers. Jimmy Smers, you are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Jimmy Smers. I run a news and media company covering psychedelics. I've certainly been impressed by the level of detail and analysis that the advisory board has stepped up to over the past several months. I do know, though, that the 2024 Department of Defense budget allocates $10 million towards researching ibogaine, 5-MeO-DMT, and other natural medicines, I believe MDMA also, on active military personnel in 2024. I did note that the latest criteria for qualifying as a facilitator in Colorado now accepts completion of hours within a military program, and that qualifies for training. Given that Colorado licensees are expected to bear the full costs of the financial burden of the program, and that Oregon psilocybin program needed $3 million from the state's general fund last year, I am asking that we can access recent financial projections or any costs or any other revenues expected from the program. This information is crucial for accurately assessing the viability and constructing a solid business case about whether anyone should take the large financial risk of completing the training and then entering the license side of Colorado's program. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Lisa Pomerantz. Lisa Pomerantz, you are unmuted.
Hi there. Yes, thank you so much for all the work that's been done on these draft rules. I am a naturopathic doctor at both Mountain River Naturopathic Clinic and Rooted Naturopathy. I do focus on mental health. And I want to, again, comment on the exclusion of naturopathic doctors as clinical facilitators, echoing what others have said about diagnosing and treating being within our scope in Colorado, as well as our extensive training in botanical medicine, which gives us an in-depth understanding of herbal actions, the chemical constituents of herbs, herb-drug interactions, and also how we do have mental health and counseling training, giving us a solid foundation for all the, of course, additional hours of training to facilitate truly transformative experiences that these clients and patients are looking for. So access to these natural medicines really will be pivotal in the work that I'm already doing with my patients, enhancing their healing, as well as allowing continuity in care that we have already established with our rapport. Additionally, I'd like to express support for the nurses being included as clinical facilitators. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to the Q&A. Gregory Ferenstein, I would like to see more clarification around rules for distinguished and legacy providers. Also, how could anyone provide evidence of experience without admitting illegal activity? Mickey Voigt, I agree with Alexa Cameron's comment regarding the relevancy and competency nurses bring to the table in the realm of clinical facilitation. The section on accelerated licensure for legacy healers is vague and feels over-restrictive and will prevent us from having enough licensed clinical facilitators to foster accessibility come January 1st of 2025. Also, Mickey Voigt, I agree with Marcy Addy's written comment regarding hours required for practicum and the importance of prep and integration, not just administration. Joseph Adams, currently the law allows people to sell bona fide harm reduction or bona fide support services in conjunction with sharing of the substances, which has led to the emergence of an unregulated legal market for facilitated psychedelic services in Colorado. This market includes not only small-time individual practitioners and ceremony groups, but also high-end luxury retreat centers. Are there any plans to move towards adding more restrictions on sharing with service provision so that there isn't a huge incentive for entrepreneurs to offer services through the unregulated market? Sorry, I lost my spot. Unregulated market rather than through the regulated program, and so that the regulated market is not undermined by competition from an unregulated one. Dr. Lloyd Cubbins, who spoke from Jamaica, the name and contact, this was not part of the chat or links area, who is the Oregon school that is now open, wife and husband started. I think you'll be able to find that by listening to this recording again. I apologize, I don't remember the individual's name. Julie Richardson, I strongly agree with the statements of Sean McAllister, Shannon Hughes, Dory Lewis, and Tasia and Erica Cohen. I wear a few hats, but speak as a patient who sees nurses at home and have been given very strong pharma by them. I see the need of nurses in residential settings and absolute must for the homebound to receive this treatment. I second Tina Williams' comments. This is Christina Pardue. I second Tina Williams' comments regarding language to protect facilitators working with women of reproductive age. And I'm just looking at the time. Liz Cesarin, I agree with Philip Wolf and Gary Perez. When governments attempt to regulate the relationship between indigenous traditions and plant medicine, several critical issues arise. These regulations are leading to cultural appropriation and exploitation. Indigenous practices are deeply rooted in cultural heritage, spirituality, and common community bonds When external authorities regulate these practices, there's a risk of commodification and extractive exploitation. Proposed regulations apply terms like use, utilize, or take advantage of, which imply exploitation of indigenous knowledge and resources. Regulating indigenous medicine can potentially violate the rights of ancestral communities as recognized by international conventions and remove their agency and access to these medicines. Indigenous medicine encompasses a holistic view of health, considering physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, rather than the silo approach of Western practices. Liz Cesarin, national and transnational pharmaceutical interests, private universities, and affluent retreat centers are actively influencing regulatory reforms in unjust and imbalanced ways. These entities are seeking to exploit indigenous resources and knowledge for corporate gain. While the intention behind regulation may be to address health inequalities and safety concerns, it's essential to ensure that indigenous communities continue to have access to their own healing practices and lead the way in crafting the best way to move forward. In summary, balancing regulation with cultural respect, community sovereignty, and equitable access is crucial when trying to regulate indigenous traditions and plant medicine. Deborah Avery, harm reduction must be emphasized. The Ben Sessa story that broke this week is one of many problematic events in the psychedelic realm. Joy Maples, the Colorado Association of Naturopathic Doctors would like to ensure that Colorado NDs are included in the list of who is eligible for professional, clinical, and/or facilitator licenses. Joseph Caruso, I'm not going to read yours aloud per your request, but we have them noted. It's just which speakers you agreed with, so thank you for that. Anonymous attendee, as a RN of 16 years prior to attending Georgetown University to become an NP, a midwife, I do not feel RNs should be included as licensed facilitators as they are unable to diagnose. We must remain within our scope. Marcy Addy, thank you. Oregon Training Program question. That's me, Acadia Professional Learning. And I'm going to go through anonymous attendee. I don't think microdosing is within the scope of facilitation services unless a facilitator monitors it during an administration session. Okay, I think that is the, oh, I don't think. We have a list of attendees. If Dr. Cubbins, if you would like to request a list of attendees, you're welcome to submit that request. We don't have a way of sharing it here today. Lisa Pomerantz, I see your hand is raised. I know you already spoke. I'm going to unmute you to see if there's something else you wanted to add. Okay, you lowered your hand. All right, that is all of the Q&A, and those are all of the raised hands. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I know I already talked about next steps, but I'm going to go over that. So thank you for participating in today's meeting. As part of this collaborative process, like I mentioned, all comments and program recommendations will be provided to the board for review before the board's next meeting on Friday, March 15th. Any proposed revisions by the board will be made available to stakeholders for additional comments prior to the board's rulemaking hearing, which is tentatively scheduled, like I said, for Friday, May 3rd of this year. All information can be found on the board's website, which was showing on the last screen under the public notices tab, and which you've seen in the Q&A. All written comments can be sent to Dora_DPO_rulemaking@state.co.us. That does conclude our stakeholder meeting today, and we thank you for your attendance and participation.